And our next speaker is another name that's in the news periodically when it comes to water issues. And I want to invite up my friend Bill Stowe, the director, whatever, the head of the Des Moines Water Works. Bill, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we? You know, I have three quick thanks. Let me start first by thanking Neil and Drake University for the invitation here. I did catch the zinger earlier today, Neil, about who would Bill sue next, and I recognize it's a rhetorical question. Maybe in the Q&A I might try to answer that. But in sitting here also, I think it's really important to thank you as participants in this process. This kind of discussion, this kind of dialogue, this kind of disagreement, I think is very important to keeping water quality, soil quality, agricultural and economic development issues alive and moving forward as a public policy discussion in Iowa. Neil, I also have to say, as I was sitting out there and kind of listening to the discussion and reflecting on the question that you asked each of us to try and answer, it reminded me of years ago in this process. People know what this is. It's called a blue book. Lawyers in particular are stuck trying to save the rest of their life and their future by responding to complex questions from law professors by dumping everything they can possibly fit on 24 pages into this in response to law professor questions. And although I was faced with a law professor question, as were each of the participants here today, the speakers here today, I didn't quite answer all of them, Neil, so I hopefully don't get an F for the course, but it did bring back some pretty bad memories, I must say. And I mentioned three thanks. Again, Neil, you, the speakers before me, what an august group and provocative group of folks, and I won't attribute these nuggets, if you will, to anyone in particular. I'm confident that you will pick up on them if you were here earlier today, but despotism of custom, wow. What an interesting phrase and kind of marker about our traditions in agriculture in Iowa and the difficulties that it causes us moving forward. Animal rights from a livestock producer earlier today, and then another extraordinarily important concept that was thrown out earlier today, banning anhydrous ammonia. Wow. And I thought I was the radical in the crowd. But again, great folks in front of me. I'll try to touch on a number of issues that I hope are of some interest to you. I do not want to fall into the habit of being too Iowa nice. I know we've had some discussion today about tribalism and how we need to step back from that and try to be more collaborative. Realistically, I have a very simple job. My job is source water protection. It's protecting the source of drinking water for 500,000 people here in central Iowa. And incidentally, each of you, Drake is a great customer. When you go to the bathroom, flush twice, drink lots of water, wash your hands thoroughly. Drake's an important customer of ours. But seriously, that is my charge. And source water protection is failing in this state. We've been involved in mitigating nitrate concentrations in our drinking water with a multi-million-dollar series of investments and operating expenses for over 25 years. This is not a new issue, and I listened to Larry, see the great data, and recognize we talk a lot about this. We're doing very little. Certainly I will articulate as clearly as I can to you that the nutrient reduction strategy has been a failure. We have not moved forward in a way that's meaningful in reducing nutrient pollution in the surface waters of the state, and certainly not in the Mississippi River Valley. But let's talk a little bit about water scarcity and water security. We hear a lot about food scarcity and food security. Often, I'm afraid we focus way too much on the idea of quantity as being the issue. This is a map that I took very recently, this year in fact, from National Geographic. If you drill into this a little bit, look at it, you'll see that they're basing their entire analysis about water scarcity on water quantity, how much is out there. We're obviously not in the arid west. You can see where Des Moines is located here. We're in the much more rain-filled area of the central United States to the east. I would argue we have water scarcity issues here that are very real because of water quality concerns associated with our source waters. Again, just to make clear what my biases are in the world, really to answer the question, who will bill sue next? Source water protection is our mission, our responsibility. Those who violate the law and materially and adversely impact our customers are always folks that we are watching very carefully and hopefully provoking to greater results. This is a state. Let me back up for a minute with probably a fundamental statement here that's important for you to understand about my biases, and certainly I have them. First, Des Moines Water Works is a public health provider. We don't just sell a commodity. We're not selling widgets. We're not selling t-shirts. We sell a commodity that you, whether you live here or not or come from outstate, absolutely rely on for your biological existence. So we believe that we're in the public health business. You cannot go on a water-free diet. It simply won't work. Item two, we're a surface water provider. We don't drill a well 3,000 feet into the Jordan Aquifer, or whatever the local aquifer would be, and pull it up and treat it. We take it from either the Des Moines or the Raccoon Rivers with a few variations that we can sure talk about. And because of that, because we're a public health provider, because we're a surface water provider, we are most importantly focused on water quality based on land uses upstream from us. If you pull water from 3,000 feet beneath the surface, you're more concerned about the geology of the land. How much iron and manganese? That isn't what we're concerned about. We're concerned about what's happening upstream, 2 or 3 or 4 days flow upstream from us in terms of land practices. And hence a very real concern, as many of you do, about preserving Iowa's soils, looking at soil as a living organism, but also the net impacts of industrial agriculture, which for us are very real and very negative at this point. We serve roughly 500,000 people, not only here in Des Moines, but in the greater Polk County area, with a couple counties to our south, and then Dallas County, a very growing county to our west. We have 3 treatment plants, millions of dollars of investment. On a day like today, we'll sell 55 or 60 million gallons of water. Our usual use, our average over the year is 40 or 45 million. If we were meeting in January, we would sell a lot less water than we do on a relatively warm September day. We take our water, again, almost all directly from 2 rivers, the Des Moines and Raccoon River. We can switch between them. We have plants on both. We also have a couple reservoirs. And then we have something that's pretty interesting in terms of technology, and it's something called an ASR, an Aquifer Storage and Recovery Well. We have 3 of them right now where we, in the off season and when nitrate levels are lower, as an example, or other pollutants are lower, we produce water in January, as an example, pump it down into the Iowa as a product of a failed industrial agricultural system is the dystopia that I think all of us want to avoid. Many of you probably think we're further from that than I think, and that's a reasonable conclusion that you can draw. Hopefully, we can share a utopic vision, and Seth, as an example, talked about this. Ray, sustainable agriculture, really something that is reachable here in Iowa, but it's going to take a whole different view of timeframes and a whole different view of importance to our community than we've seen. The timeframes, I'm not going to say that how we're viewing it in terms of decades, how we're viewing environmental protection in terms of decades is acceptable. The organization that I'm part of for 25 years have been battling toxic levels of nitrate in our surface water. This is not a new issue. We're tired of talking about it. This is an issue that should be dealt with now and can't be kicked down the can as needing more time. It's real, and it's been real for 20 or 25 years. We need to deal with nutrient management concerns now, not by saying that it will come over time and improve. It clearly has not. The nutrient reduction strategy, 5 years now in the making, as several people have said, great science in many ways, and looking at what the sources of overnutrification is horrible in terms of policy. It's provided no meaningful results. It at the state level has taken, we believe, and it's hard to get to this data, unfortunately, about $125 million of your state tax money and got us nowhere. Sprinkled money around, had a number of ribbon cuttings involving electives and a great splash of publicity, but absolutely no results. Sustainable agriculture can get us there. Let's see our fields that are green year-round with the use of cover crops, something that progressive farmers are very in tune on. And Seth, I will attribute you with the animal rights comment earlier today. Wouldn't it be nice if we had more pastures with livestock and far less confinements? Thanks to you and others for working in that direction. And ultimately, we hope that will take us to cleaner surface waters. A great picture of down-cut erosion. Look where those corn plants are. They're not just on the bank. They're immediately on the bank by the river, and some of them, this is on the Raccoon River incidentally, and some of them on the down-cut portion. This is a problem for us, and it's not just a problem for us as ratepayers at Des Moines Water Works, taking our drinking water in part from the Raccoon River. Isn't this a community problem? Isn't this a disregard for the natural heritage of our state and for our view of real environmental protection and sustainable agriculture? What are some of the obstacles, in my view, or actually they may be compass points that take us back to the dystopic view that I think we're on, absent real intervention? Status quo agriculture, the despotism of custom, the idea that we're very productive, our grain production is very productive. As an example, we're very proud to be the first in corn, usually the first in soybeans, the first in hogs, with 7 times more hogs than people. Usually the first in poultry production, as an example. All those come with a cost. And we're more interested on those numbers than we are on focusing on the more balanced view of what the environmental consequences of that are. And public policy discussions focused only on public responsibility. I have great difficulty in my role today, and as a taxpayer, hearing the discussion about where the public money is going to come from to help producers to remove pollutants from the commonwealth of this state. That's not to say there isn't a role for continued government money or more government money, more public money, but this idea that continuing to divert money from areas that are not producers to incent production that creates more pollution is a real problem and will continue to be a problem for us. And I think that the days are waning when this is tolerable at a national level. Great research, Larry and others have been involved in, Chris Jones, Keith, involving our contribution to the Gulf hypoxic zone. If we believe that those south of us will continue to tolerate that kind of social injustice, that kind of foisting of our pollutants and our economic success as a cost to Gulf residents, we are whistling through the graveyard. That will change. It hasn't changed, but the day will come when there will be some accountability, and appropriately so, for producers here in central Iowa for the damage they're causing not only locally in the rivers, but throughout the Gulf to our south. Wow. Some discussion earlier in one or more of the presentations about artificial drainage and its contribution to farm pollution. There's nothing very natural about this hydrology that you see from Sac County. Obviously, that's bringing a quantity of water and a degraded quality of water to those of us downstream, as opposed to letting that water go naturally through the soil biome. Some things that we think are pretty serious, that are important to address this seriously: prioritized and dedicated funding, precision conservation. Don't spend your money through ribbon cuttings throughout the entire state. Look at those watersheds and those practices that provide the greatest return on investment, something we don't think about often enough in using public dollars. We need to be thinking about that. Where can that money be optimized? Talking about accountability again, our ratepayers in the greater Des Moines area, Des Moines Water Works ratepayers, accountable for the pollution that's coming down to the Des Moines and Raccoon River, and those areas where we are contributors to that, we are and will address that. But what we see in the Des Moines and Raccoon River coming from producers largely upstream from us, they should be held accountable through a permitting process or through a public accountability. We're certainly not seeing it in the nutrient reduction strategy. And I realize the policy choices here are pretty stark and pretty complicated and get us into this not so Iowa nice issues about how producers need to contribute far more and take responsibility for what are the costs of their production that comes into our public water systems. What can you do? Because you certainly are conservation leaders. Get more familiar with the best management practices of our neighbors. Our neighbors in Wisconsin, as an example, our neighbors even in Nebraska and in Minnesota have far more protective best management practices and far greater penetration of best management practices than we have here. Leadership vision of Iowa as a clean water state. We are normalizing the abnormal. We believe that our rivers should look like Cappuccino, apparently, but it's okay. And if we go to northeast Iowa, and it's expected that their water is beautiful. We should not accept that our rivers in central Iowa either look like Cappuccino or like green pea soup. That is unacceptable. We can address that and should address that. Neil obviously is trying to address me right now, and I won't ignore you for long, Neil. We believe that this discussion of accountability, not just putting more public resources into a solution, is important. Where's the long-term accountability? We've seen in a number of USDA practices that money goes into conservation practices. When the money disappears for whatever reasons in the cycle of funding, the conservation practices go away. There's no long-term accountability on the part of producers. There need to be for this to be a meaningful adventure. What can you do? Defending our friends. I know we're not supposed to talk about the Leopold Center. Apparently that's one of the rules I will also ignore. I don't understand the war from university presidents, whether it's on the Labor Center, the University of Iowa, or here closer to home on the Leopold Center from Iowa State University. We need to defend our friends like those at the Leopold Center and push for refunding next year. We also need to make sure that our friends at the Flood Center of Iowa are adequately funded each and every year for the work that they do. There was an attempt to blow Des Moines Water Works up a couple years ago in the legislature. It was unsuccessful, but clearly it's something that could come back. We believe that local control, particularly in areas like drinking water, are very important. Also supporting alternatives to industrial ag, CSA movement, local foods, organic farming. That's where the strength of development and change in industrial or in agriculture is today, and promote environmental discourse like this one. Neil, you've made your point. I'm done. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.